Please watch the video until the end. Every second matters to understand what happened beneath the Basilica. Chapter 1: The Summons. They called me at 3 in the morning, and the phone's tone sounded like a knuckle on a coffin lid. I had been a documentary editor long enough to know what a midnight call could mean. A new lead, a sudden death, or someone's need to be seen before it was too late. This one was none of those simple things. "I need you to record it," Elena said. Her voice was a thread pulled tight. "You won't believe me if I tell you over lunch. Please." Elena was the parish secretary. Small, stubborn in the way of people who had learned to keep house in the presence of old things. She lived near the Basilica, the one with the bell everyone avoided at dusk. The Basilica had been a landmark of crumbling stone and waxed wood for generations, a place where the city folded up its sins at night like soiled laundry. I told myself I was going because of work. A filmed ritual could be a way into a story, a way to make my name. But something else tugged me. I had grown up in neighborhoods like this, with churches that remembered the dead better than the living. I had learned to trust my skin's knowledge that not every secret needed an audience. Yet I went, camera in hand, because some secrets demanded witnesses. Chapter 2: The Mission. The Basilica smelled of old beeswax and cool iron. Petals blackened in vases, like explained apologies. A single candle guttered at the altar. Father Tomas, my host though not my friend, met me with the kind of physical stillness that reads as both endurance and exhaustion. "This isn't spectacle," he said without preface. "We don't want crowds." He led me down a narrow corridor into a small room beneath the choir loft, a place stained by soot and things that you only notice by accident. Scorch marks in the plaster, a crucifix with its paint peeled to the bone. The woman they called Marisol lay on a narrow mattress, wrapped in a hospital blanket. She had the hollowness of someone who had been drained of language. Her mouth opened and closed like a trapped bird. 2 others hovered, an older nun whose eyes had the flat calm of someone who has survived too many tragedies, and a young seminarian who kept looking at me as if the lens might fix whatever he feared. Marisol's hands were cold as a fish. When I set up the camera, I realized my fingers wanted to skip details, like the bruise of a nail at her temple or the tiny patch of hair singed as if by lightning. It started as a dream, Elena had told me earlier. Then the dreams bled into waking. The first things we heard were not voices, but noises at the edge of hearing. A shudder beneath the floorboards, the slow creak of the bell tower, as if someone were rolling a giant bone in the square above. Chapter 3: The Room Beneath. They said the Basilica had been built on a foundation of older stones that had heard things before the first prayers here. When we closed the door to the little room, the light went away like a secret. The only illumination came from the candle on a table and the red recording light on my camera. I narrated into the microphone like a police report, her age, timeline, any triggers. My voice sounded too loud in that low-ceilinged room. The nun prayed while the seminarian fumbled with a book of rites that had lost half its page numbers. Father Tomas asked me to keep the camera steady. They wanted a record, he said, for themselves if nothing else. We were a trio of witnesses lined up like witnesses to a crime. Marisol's breathing changed. At first it was a discarded rhythm, like someone who had forgotten how to exist. Then a scraping sound crawled from her throat. It wasn't a voice I recognized. No human dialect I could translate, but it formed words as if learning to eat them. The sound hit me in the hollow of my chest. It knew more about fear than I did. "Who are you?" Father Tomas whispered, not quite a priest's question, more a man's test of what would answer. The first thing to respond wasn't language. It was a cavernous inhale that made the candle flame bow, then a low, metallic laughter threaded through a dozen voices. I turned the lens slowly toward Marisol because my fingers would not obey me otherwise. She wasn't looking at us. Her eyes tracked a point above the ceiling as if observing an invisible calculus. The air grew colder, like being buried and left to cool. Chapter 4: The Voice That Knew My Name. Then it spoke my name. I'd been careful not to tell anyone why I cared. Years ago, my sister vanished into a hospice of mood and medicines. I had told myself nothing about that, no confessions, no detective work, just a tight little knot of grief. I kept in a drawer. But Marisol's voice didn't know my secrets. It knew something older. The name of the girl I had been before grief braided me into someone who watched and catalogued. Isla, it said, and the sound unspooled like a rope. The room fell into a kind of assaultive stillness. Father Tomas's jaw worked. The nun's prayer faltered. The seminarian's fingers tightened on the book until the pages whispered. I don't know you, I told the darkness, but my answer felt like an appeasement. You do, came the voice, layered now, childlike, gnarled, cheerful, each tone scraping like a different blade on bone. You listen for cracks. You took her without asking. My heart turned like a stone in my throat. Faces around me blurred to moving cutouts. The camera's red light recorded the scene, impartial as a blade. My hands trembled, then steadied. I could feel my own name in the way the voice tasted it, as if the very syllables carried a memory it wanted to feed on. I thought of my sister at the edge of a hospital bed, how she had said, "Don't stop looking," as if missingness were a map, and we had to follow it. Now something in this room had used that command as a weapon and aimed it at me. Chapter 5, Ritual and Fractures. They began the rites because any group facing a thing like this wants scaffolding, words and motions that have been proven, they hope, to matter. Father Tomas read from the old book. The nun intoned responses. The seminarian rang a small bell to puncture the air. I kept filming, the clack of my camera's autofocus a metronome on a tablecloth of terror. The thing in Marisol shifted. It had learned how to speak in our learned languages now, borrowing cadence and grammar like an actor who had stolen a costume, but those words always slid sideways into something else. Images, sudden heat, a memory that wasn't mine but felt like a laceration. At one point, the entity made the nun see, or perhaps made her remember, a field of lilies rotting under snow. The nun screamed, not with pain but with recognition, and pointed to the rafters as if something had walked above the beams. Father Tomas's voice cracked, but he kept going, fossilized faith becoming his only armor. The air in the little room began to thicken with a sense of being observed. The camera's viewfinder captured things the eye refused to hold. A shadow pooling at the base of the mattress, a smear on the wall that might be charcoal or might be a bruise on the world's skin. Without warning, the bell above the Basilica began to toll, though none of us had heard any hand strike it. One chime, long and ancient sounding, as if it had been waiting decades to be unlatched. When the bell sounded, every surface in the room seemed to breathe. The photograph on the wall, the old pastor who had once served here, blinked. I don't mean figuratively. For a fraction of a second, the eyes in the portrait were wet with tears. Chapter 6, After the Bells. We thought that if we recorded it, if the world saw the evidence, we might shrink the thing down with scrutiny. Instead, our witness felt like a mirror offered to a beast. The camera did not lie, but it also did not comfort. At dawn, the voice fell into a low, final murmur. Marisol's breathing eased into an almost ordinary rhythm. The seminarian wept openly, as if he'd reached the end of a road he had not expected to find. Father Tomas sat with his head bowed, a priest who had traded the certainty of doctrine for the messy calculus of survival. Later, when we reviewed the footage, there were long minutes where the audio folded into itself and the visual frame thinned into static. But in the gaps, in the edges, there were things the camera had caught, and that human memory often discarded. A hand hovering above a chest without touching it. A shadow that rejected the light source. A syllable caught in the thicket of a whisper that repeated, over and over, a name I had not heard in years. After we left, Elena pressed a paper into my hand. An old photograph of my childhood home, taken the day my sister disappeared from the version I remembered. In the back of the picture, someone had written a single sentence in a hand I did not recognize. She stepped through when the bell tolled. I took the photograph and understood then that the thing we had threaded through that night did not detach itself from the people it touched. It did not prefer bodies so much as histories, those thin, fraying cords that tie you to memory. We had gone to witness an exorcism and had come away with new knowledge. Some doors don't close when you pray over them. They hinge. If this account unsettled you, Please subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give the video a like, leave a comment about what you think we missed, and share the video with someone brave enough to watch it until the end.